Welcome to the State of Global Agile Marketing podcast with your host, John Cass. Together, we'll take a closer look into the state of global agile marketing. You'll learn from interviews with top agile thought leaders and practitioners and gain fresh new insights for your journey. Let's get ready to dive in.
Welcome to the Global Agile Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, John Cass, here in Boston, Massachusetts. Today, I'll be interviewing Lucia Arandia, who is the marketing manager at Rangedale in Melbourne, Australia. Today's podcast is on the state of agile marketing in Australia. Welcome, Lucia.
Thanks, John. Great to be with you.
Well, it's good to see you, and thank you so much for joining us today. In preparing for this call, we talked a little about your journey in using agile marketing. While the focus is on Australia, you came to the profession via communications. Maybe you can tell me your story about that journey with agile and also to marketing.
Sure. So I originally started in communications through an internship in New York in the finance industry, so very much a straight hierarchical structure. And that was kind of the start of my career. I had this itch to explore marketing, so was constantly looking at what the marketing team was doing at the organization I was at, and eventually found a role outside of the organization in a agile marketing agency. And prior to that, I didn't really know anything about agile marketing. I was new to marketing, new to agile, so kind of went headfirst into it by joining this agency. And I told them that I did some research on it when I joined, and I was like, yeah, this sounds great, because their big thing was that you had to be agile and you had to already be ready to hit the ground running, as they worked in a pure agile form. So that was really how I was introduced to agile marketing, and I worked with them for around 2 years, and that was based in the UK. And part of what I did there was not only work in an agile format, but also help preparing agile training for other marketing organizations. And that's where I fell in love with the methodology, with the way of working. And it just, to me, always seemed like, why aren't we all doing this? Why haven't we all been working in this way? And having that contrast from communications, where you're very, very siloed, to then being told that you're working in this cross-functional way and that you can collaborate with people. That's what really excited me about being at the agency. And now I moved to Australia about 2 years ago and took on marketing roles here as a marketing manager, first at a law firm and now at a drainage and construction firm. So very different industries, where marketing is definitely more of a on the side, much smaller budget. So agile has kind of been what has helped me through it in terms of bringing other people into my team.
Great. Now let's go to our sponsors on the Marketing Podcast Network.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
Perhaps you can tell me a little bit about the business culture and structure of business in Australia and how that impacts how open marketers and businesses are to the agile approach.
Yeah. So I think definitely the Australian business culture is more hierarchical than I was used to in the UK. And I've done some research, and I think it tends to be more traditional across the industries, particularly in industries such as construction or legal, industries like law firms and all of that. Obviously, there's big technology companies in Australia that are changing formats. So in Melbourne, there's Canva, and they're introducing new ways of working, as I guess technology and startups have done in the US and the UK. So there is a cultural shift happening. But I would say, in general, from what I have read and what I have experienced, it's slightly more delayed than the UK or the US. It's still more hierarchical, which is probably a big impact on the slightly slower adoption to Agile that I have seen.
Great, great. And how would you describe the culture of marketing departments in Australia?
Yeah, so I guess my experience with marketing departments, because I've been a sole marketer in different teams, and from joining marketing networks here, is the culture is really impacted by the lack of importance. It's getting a lot of the time in different businesses. So there seems to be lower budget on marketing spend, which I think does impact the culture. You don't have such a large team. And marketing tends to still not be as well understood. So they're kind of just a department that sits on their own, and they're not as integrated into the business. And it seems to be kind of a mystical thing in Australia when they talk about marketing, that no one is quite sure what it is yet. That's been my personal experience, but from reading more about the state of marketing here, a lot of the research shows that there is a depletion in the investment in marketing, which is impacting the growth and the development of the industry, I guess, the sector.
Interesting, interesting. And what's your assessment of the level of adoption of agile marketing by companies? What examples do you see in Australia?
Yeah, so I think it's slowly growing. One of the big telecommunications companies here in Australia, Telstra, went through an agile transformation in 2019. So that encompassed their whole company. So that wasn't just agile marketing, just an agile methodology. And I think that's a really good example of a cultural shift. And some of the things that they say in their interviews about the process is that shift in culture, the shift in decision-making process has been a huge impact. And it's obviously like it's a hard change. We both work in Agile. We understand that it's, especially when you're thinking of a telecommunications company with thousands of employees, it's not happening overnight. But I think the fact that these big companies such as Telstra here are starting this process, it will open the doors for other organizations to follow suit. I think that was a really good example because they followed a scaled agile framework. So they really went for the full remit of it. And I guess telecommunications would have been a very traditional format. I have no experience working with Telstra, but I imagine it would have been a huge cultural shift. But it's a good example of a true Australian company, I think. A big player here making that change. And a large part of it is down to the digital transformation. And that's a large part for all organizations in Australia that are looking to adopt Agile. I would say the digital transformation needs to happen before they can do the Agile.
That makes a lot of sense. And I suppose digital transformation has affected marketing departments more than many other ones. So it makes sense that that department would then change, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Now let's go to our sponsors on the Marketing Podcast Network.
You know that feeling when someone shows up for you just when you need it most? That's what Uber is all about. Not just a ride or dinner at your door. It's how Uber helps you show up for the moments that matter. Because showing up can turn a tough day around or make a good one even better. Whatever it is, big or small, Uber is on the way. So you can be on yours. Uber, on our way.
How are companies deploying Agile in Australia? What different types of adoption have you seen? You know, is it Scrum, Kanban, hybrid? What are you seeing there?
What I'm seeing is that a lot of organizations are using Kanban without realizing that they're using Kanban. So in both organizations that I have worked in, we use Kanban, but nobody realizes that what they're doing is agile, or what people in their teams are trying to do is agile. And I think that's down to timeframes and organizations trying to work to tighter deadlines, tighter budgets. That's where Kanban really comes into play. You kind of hold people accountable. You know exactly where you're at in your process. But outside of my experience, from what I read, Telstra used the scaled agile framework, and it looked like they went for a bit of a hybrid as well in terms of what they've used in their process. But overall, I would say that in terms of things that people are using, it would definitely be Kanban, and then probably Scrum if people are looking at, or organizations are looking at condensing teams, because it really lends itself to that cross-functional work method. And I think as the whole world has seen over the last couple of years, budgets are really being cut, which means roles are being merged, which is forcing people down the agile route, because it's hard to be siloed and work when you have team constraints.
Right, right. In talking with other folks around the world, there does seem to have been a cutback in agile consulting and elements like that. Have you seen similar things going on in Australia?
Yeah, I would say a cutback in consulting in general, especially in marketing consulting. So whereas previously we would have used agencies to do different specialities, such as you'd bring in a digital marketer, or you'd bring in somebody to do your paid ads specifically, or you'd bring in someone to consult you on agile methodology. That definitely has been cut back, I would say, and that's just budget constraints, which also makes it difficult to further adopt agile, because you don't have specialists you can work with. You're being expected to take on all hats, so it's like you're your own scrum, more or less. So you're having to pull from outside of the marketing team to get those expertise. And I would say that is a common experience in many organizations that don't have more than 2 or 3 marketers.
Great. What's the right strategy for agile adoption in Australia? Is it finding motivated individuals who start agile in the department, or pushing the concept of agile marketing top down? Although that's kind of against agile, isn't it? It's supposed to be self-use, but I'll use that. If the idea is being brought top down, what's the importance of leadership in agile marketing implementations in Australia?
I think it's hugely important. Particularly because Australia is coming from a more traditional hierarchical structure. The emphasis is still looking towards, well, what are our leaders expecting from us? So as much as it has to be from the bottom up in terms of adoption, it has to be advocated for at the top. So I think I have tried to introduce Agile at the company I'm at the moment, and with my team, it was hard because there isn't the understanding of Agile at the top. So there isn't the importance on taking the time to train the team to understand why this is really working. So I think having leaders in organizations who have perhaps come from an Agile background, or who have worked in that way, or are interested in it, will make the world of difference in the adoption, because they will see the end result. I think the hard part in Agile adoption is that part where you're learning about it and you're changing your format of working. And that adoption is really difficult when you're getting pushback from the top to say, kind of just carry on doing as you're doing, which I think there is a bit of an underculture of that here in terms of that resistance to change. And that's probably a big challenge.
That's interesting. So what's the benefit of agile marketing for our listeners, and what will it bring to the future of marketing to businesses in Australia based on your experience?
I think the biggest benefit will be the faster decision making. So that whole test and try approach in agile marketing, everything goes to market faster because you're collaborating from the start, will be a huge benefit to Australian businesses in terms of you don't have to, and I find this is part of the culture as well, waiting for that final perfect product at the end. It seems, and this is just anecdotal personal experience. I have found when working with teams, people will hold information or hold something they're working with right up until they feel like it's the perfect version to share with their manager or with their leaders for review. Whereas I've come in and I'm sharing stuff right from the start. And I'm like, tell me if you like this, tell me if you don't. We'll reiterate, we'll change, and we'll work on it together. I think to me that's the biggest benefit of Agile is you're not waiting for the final decision. You're getting feedback all the time. And particularly if you're releasing things to the market. So if you were looking at advertising campaigns and marketing or marketing campaigns, the Australian audiences are very honest. So the Australian market will tell you if they don't like something, and they'll tell you fast. And that's where I think agile marketing would work quite well, because that's something I have found with Australians. They don't hold back on their feedback, which is perfect for agile. That's what you want. You want that honesty and that continuous change.
Great. Well, Lucia, this has been a great interview. Thank you for doing such a great job. I really appreciate you spending the time with me on the podcast, telling us about agile marketing and what's happening in Australia.
Thank you. It's been great. Thanks, John.
Thanks for joining us on the Global Agile Marketing Podcast with John Cass. My thanks to Lucia, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Global Agile Marketing Podcast. Be sure and subscribe to our show and leave a review to let us know what you thought of today's episode. And if you like what you heard and want to learn more, visit globalagilemarketing.com.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkins-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkinsporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.